All right, let's take a look now at how gangs infiltrate our communities and why children are vulnerable to recruitment. Now I'm joined by Associate Professor of Criminology at the University of Cape Town. Professor, good morning, and thank you so much for your time. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika.
Good morning, Mr. Chaba. Good morning to your viewers.
Firstly, can you tell us, in your experience, why some young people, particularly boys, feel a need to join gangs?
Mr. Chaba, firstly, let me just dispel this notion that gangs infiltrate the community. The gangs in Orange Farm are from Orange Farm. They've not infiltrated the community. They've grown up there, they've lived there all their lives, and they formed their own little gangs in turfs. Why young boys in particular are drawn to gangs is because of a number of factors. One of the first factors, particularly young children at school are drawn to gangs, is that they do so for protection. Often they are harassed to and from the way to school, or on their way to school, and some of them are bullied, and in order to prevent the bullying from continuing, some of them band together and join gangs that can provide them with protection. Other young children have a propensity towards violence. Not all of them. There's very few of them that of these young boys that enjoy the thrill of hurting other people, and that has got to do with factors in the way that they've grown up in their homes and so forth and so on. And one has to understand all of those particular factors that propel a young person towards joining a gang and then committing violence. Not all young boys who are bullied accept the bullying, because the rule of the street is you show no fear. And so young boys react to bullying or threats from rival youngsters and adolescents. And I wouldn't want to call them a gang at this stage. Some of them are forced into the gang because of where they live. They might live in a place where, where another gang operates, and their rivals then see them as members of the gang based on where they live, even though they're not members of the gang. And because of the fact that they live in a particular area, they could be targeted as being a member of the gang that operates in that area.
And what would you say, Professor Kynes, are the primary drivers of gang violence in South African communities overall?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that question. You are very, very soft, sorry.
Okay. What would you say are the primary drivers of gang violence in the country overall?
I think gang involvement of youngsters has got a lot to do with parenting skills, the fact that parents can't hold their families together, that our parents are getting younger by the day, and that the social values that holds communities together appears to be loosening. And so you do have new forms of communication that also influences the youngsters' decision-making abilities. And that's a very, very big factor that one has to consider. Can our young people make decisions for themselves? For instance, at the beginning of this clip, you've indicated that that young children as young as 9 are being recruited. Now, a child as young as 9 has got no criminal capacity, don't understand the bigger issues in life, and possibly could be used, but do not join a gang because they intentionally want to be in a gang. And so some of them are propelled into the gang and really don't know what they're doing when they're at that age. It's when they're 14, 15 upwards that one can talk about them making rational choices when it comes to deciding to join a gang.
All right, Professor, what are the common signs or behaviors that may indicate that a child is at risk of joining a gang?
Well, the child will normally withdraw from family life, try to participate, but clearly his or her friends would play a far bigger role in their lives. And if I were a parent, the one thing that you must take note of is if this child is forever leaving the house with his friends, or if his friends in particular, if it's a boy child, come to fetch him on regular occasions. They hang out together, he's never home, his behavioral patterns at home changes, his attitudes towards his siblings and his parents change, and nobody appears to be able to get through to the child to change his or her ways. You find complaints from the school, from teachers complaining about the child's behavior in class. And then you have to take note of, as a parent, that this child is busy drifting into a gang. And you have to, as parents, show that child much love, spend time with your boy child in particular, and allow him to socialize with other positive role models within the community. Not all children belong to gangs. I think it's a fallacy. Some children actually actively find other ways of uh, um, um, involving their time, and they join football clubs, they join youth clubs, they become involved in community initiatives. And so parents, and it's not a policing thing immediately, it only becomes a policing thing when that child commits a crime. It depends much on the way that the community rears that child and the role of the parents in the life of that particular child.
Professor, how effective are current policing strategies in tackling gang violence? And what changes would you recommend?
Look, 3 people have been killed over the last week, 3 young men, and nobody's been arrested. That is indicative of the fact that there's lots of fear within that particular community. And people have not come forward, or possibly those who have come forward do not want their particulars made known, because even witnesses are killed by these gang members. And so one has to encourage the community to stand together against the gangs, not violently so, but visibly so, because people have to feel that they own their community and not these few members who call themselves gangsters. And so there's a lot that can be done on the part of the community to mobilize, to make young people feel safer. And now let's come to the police. I think the police have their hands full. I don't think that they are able to use their own statistics to indicate that they have to increase policing in that particular area. If you look at the crime stats in that area, and I'm just an observer, in the second quarter in 2024-2025, there were 43 murders in Orange Farm. For the third quarter, October 24 to December 2024, that went up to 69 murders. And clearly, with the spate of killings that's happening now, you're going to find the murder rate even increasing over the next couple of quarters. So it is, I think, a serious issue, and the police have to see see it for what it is. The level of interpersonal violence has clearly increased in this community called Orange Farm, and something has got to be done. I've heard the MEC, I've heard the MMCs that went there. You have to bring together a joint community policing and developmental institutions to work with young people. A lot of investment, unfortunately, have to go into working with young people within that community. And then you have to have a strong law enforcement arm that deals with young people that routinely and habitually commit crime. Because if that isn't broken, there's no way that the community can, in a short space of time, return to normality.
Now, Professor Kynes, schools are a target for gangsterism as well. And they say schools are a microcosm of society. Now, should schools prioritize hiring more security personnel or focus on community-based solutions?
Well, I think that the schools have been a target for a long time. It's not a new thing. adolescent young males attend school. And a lot of them have disputes. Part of growing up is having disputes with friends, with young men who live in a different part of the community, or men that you have to pass by, or youngsters that you have to pass by. And they're often harassed. And so they react as young males to the threats, to the catcalls. It's a normal thing for a young male to do so. And some of them do not take kindly to bullying. And often, and even in this case, Vulani in Glela High School, where the youngster um, was accosted at his home by a gang and then eventually was killed at the school. A lot of the unresolved disputes that young males have at their homes and within the communities are follow them into the school, and they take these unresolved conflicts into the school grounds. And that is why the gang entered the school to deal with this particular young man, and they killed him. And so that's very, 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 very tragic. And so those disputes within the community between young men must be resolved. And I think our adults, our parents, and other young people, and particularly the religious fraternity, the mosques and the churches, have to play a huge role in the lives of these young men growing up as men. They have to be socialized very differently from the way they socialize now.
All right.
Coming back to the schools, we have a lot of problems with violence on the schools, even here in the Western Cape. But there's been a process where community patrollers have played a bigger role. So my investment, if I were the MEC for Safety, is to strengthen the community patrollers, the men and women who live around the school, who make sure that youngsters are safe during intervals, during their breaks, and who patrol the area when students are on their way to school and when they leave school to go home.
All right. Professor, could you paint a picture currently of what the landscape, if I may call it that, of gangsterism looks like in the Western Cape? As we know, I mean, the Western Cape has been in the news consistently so.
Well, I think what you are finding is a trend of the gang and gang fights that you're having at the moment. It's very violent. It's broken out in a lot of different communities, and there's been a war of attrition between one of the two bigger gangs in Cape Town, and particularly I think that the Fancy Boys gang are showing very violent tendencies because they're establishing control in many of the communities. And in order for them to do that, they are fighting the local gangs, the bigger gangs, Americans, the sexy boys, the schoolboys, and so forth. And so you are seeing conflicts, gang conflicts emerging everywhere, and young men being killed through drive-by shootings, and young groups of young men having access to firearms. And remarkably, this is one of the things that I've noticed in Orange Farm. The weapon of choice there appears to be knives and pangas, whereas in the Western Cape, it's all firearms. There's quite a lot of firearms on the street, and I think that's one area that I think that the residents of Orange Farm can use to their advantage. As long as firearms are not involved, I think that the adults in Orange Farm could nip this in the bud as soon as possible, because we don't get the sense that a lot of firearms have been used, whereas in the Western Cape, we have a preponderance of firearms with younger men having access to firearms and ammunition.
All right.
And that's the problem that we have in the Western Cape.
Okay. Professor, lastly, and very briefly, in the case of Nando Dlamini, who was buried just yesterday, 19 years old, his family disputes the fact that he was in a gang. And whether this is true or not, what are the potential reasons behind families denying or hiding gang involvement, and how can we address this?
I want to say this to you. I think that the media must stop sensationalizing when a young man is killed by a gang. They often make the association that that individual has been a gang member. I think you have to wait until there is confirmation on the part of the police investigation that he indeed was a gang member. And it's very hurtful to families when their son, who's never been a gang member or potentially could be a gang member. Um, and as I said earlier on, it's where young people live. The rival gangs make associations that because he lives in a particular area, he could be a member of a gang. It might well be that he was a member of a gang. But if that is the case, then of course there are different consequences. But I don't think we must rush to make associations that he was a gang member because he was killed by a gang. I think we must wait for the police investigation to draw those very firm conclusions. And I think that young parents and older parents must invest quite a lot of time with loving their children, their boy children, and showing them other ways away from violence.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for your time, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Associate